Um, Matilda, do you want to introduce, and then we'll kind of like open it up to Jason?
Well, yeah, I think we missed somebody, but it's not a problem. We can wait a little bit. And yeah, I'm really nervous because this is, of course, our first class ever, except for our introduction that we had last time. So Jason already had 2 classes with us. And so, yeah, it will create for us a little bit of context of crypto art history, and yeah, I think this speaks for itself. So yeah, if you want to, I don't know, can we start, or should we, I don't know, wait a little bit?
I think usually, Jason, you start by like wanting to go for a round of introductions. So maybe we can start from there, and then as soon as people join, yeah, they'll just when
Yeah, I
can.
think that sounds great. Yeah, one of the I like doing these for a lot of reasons. I think it's an important thing for the community, but on a selfish level, one of the reasons I love doing this is because I get to meet all the members of the incoming classes and learn about new exciting artists that I may not know about. So yeah, if we could just quickly go through and have each person maybe introduce yourself and just kind of briefly talk about the kind of art that you're making, and that would be a great way to kick off the call, the meeting. So I don't know, Nicole. I think sometimes you go through and choose the people one by one and call on them. I don't know if maybe Matilda.
I can call them if you want.
That would be great.
It's not a
Yeah.
problem for me. Yeah, I follow the list that I have here. So we have first Ana Maria.
Hi everybody. Hi Artnome. This is so exciting to be chatting. Big time fan of you, as I'm sure we all are. I am a Colombian poet. I've been living in the US for a few years now, though. And I work mostly on themes surrounding the female voice of the home and domesticity, and trying to really elevate that voice that sometimes is felt to be made inferior, and to really give it value and validation. My poetry tends to be very direct. I want to connect immediately with the readers, and really excited to be exploring sort of the potentials of literary NFTs on the blockchain.
Awesome. Great to meet you, Ana Maria. And yeah, I'm excited to see where we go with poetry and writing on the blockchain. I think this might be, people are talking about this being a big year for gaming. And I actually kind of hope / think that we might actually see a lot of cool new stuff, new work around writing and poetry. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Perfect. Then we have Analicia.
Yeah, hi. My name is Analicia, and I'm a generative artist. I actually discovered processing about 3 years ago and kind of worked on that in isolation, making sketches in processing, and didn't know that what I was doing had a name, which is generative art. And actually, your article on your website on generative art, it's been one of the first things I've read on the art form. So I'm very excited to be here today and listen to you speak. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome, nice to meet you, Analicia. And yeah, I'm a huge processing fan. It's amazing what Ben and Casey's tool has done, and now there's a whole big community behind it. So I started using processing probably 2003. A lot of people know me for my writing, but not necessarily as an artist. But yeah, big fan of processing. And good to meet you.
Anubis.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Hello. Well, Artnome, we've met before actually when you've come to Montreal for the NFT event. And so this isn't sort of my first time interacting with you in person, but when I found out that you were here, I was super excited. I was like, holy shit, Artnome was in Montreal earlier, and now he's going to be a sort of mentor in this program. This is wild. And so I had talked to you in person a few times, and you gave me you gave me one of your I call them the Genesis NFT headbands because they're black, they're not pink anymore. But yeah, for myself, I am a multidisciplinary artist based out of Montreal that focuses on post-colonial and neo-Orientalist works focused on hybridizing and modernizing ancient Egyptian mythos and identity within the
Awesome.
blockchain.
Yeah, no, great
And
to
that's
meet
pretty
you
much it.
again in under these circumstances. That was an amazing event in Montreal, hosted by Martin, whose last name I was butcher. I think it's Ostachowski, who's a good friend of mine. So I'm glad that you're in the residency.
Ahmad?
Hello, Jason. How are you doing? Really nice to meet you. And thank you very much for taking this course with us. It's really a pleasure. I'm really inspired by what you're doing in NFT space. And I'm actually a 3D artist. I'm a CG artist, 3D concept and motion designer. And I've been working about 8 years professionally in this field, making videos and motion graphics. And kind of some of my subjects that I work about, I really interested about the space, future civilization, life and consciousness. And I kind of create some works for transhumanism and cybernetics. And I'm really enjoying this class with you, and I'm sure that I will learn a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's great to meet you. I think I might recognize your name from Twitter. And always interested to see what 3D artists are doing in this space. I'm an old man, and I took classes at RISD and Maya, I guess like 20 years ago now. But I haven't done much in 3D since, so it always blows my mind how quickly that space has changed. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, man. Actually, you're not old, and I think you're one of the youngest. You have all this excitement, and I'm very inspired by all the excitement. You actually lead the way in the NFT space. That's great. Thank you very much.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
Abeli?
Well, my name is Sabeli. I'm a Cuban illustrator and NFT artist. I like to use bold colors, use topics of fantasy on my artworks. I like to create imaginative worlds. I do digital illustration, 2D. And nice to meet you, Aaron. I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really excited for this first class.
Great to meet you, Habeli. And where are you from?
Cuba. I'm from Cuba. And
Cuba.
I'm based, yes, right now in Cuba.
Very cool. I wish I was in Cuba right now. I'm staring at a bunch of snow and ice out my window. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Here is really hot right now, so you will like it.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Chris?
Hey, nice to meet you, Artnome. Huge fan, especially of right-click save as. I've been really enjoying the writings on there so far. Please keep it up because I've been sharing it a lot with my sort of circle of friends. But I'm a generative artist, sort of background in like projection art, VJing, that kind of thing. But I've moved over the pandemic. I moved really into can-based art, and I've been really focusing just the conversation and collaboration between possible between that can evolve over time. I mean, human collaboration is a conversation. I'm based in Vancouver or nearby Vancouver.
Very cool. Yeah, so we have a good Canada contingency. Nice to meet you, Chris.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the kind words about right-click save. I'll be sure to pass them on to the team. Yeah, I think they're knocking it out of the park in the last few weeks. So really appreciate that.
I'm a web designer by trade, and probably goes through. So yeah, keep it up. It's really great. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Now, Claudia?
Hi, Jason. It's nice to chat with you again. We actually met in Montreal as well. And so it's great to see you here. So I'm a photographer, And most recently, I've been working with AI and historical processes, specifically cyanotypes. And I just wanted to extend another thank you to you again for recommending Runway ML to me, because that's kind of been the main software I've been using to train my models and to input my own databases of botanical images into. And I've really enjoyed the outputs it's been giving me. So thank you so much for that recommendation. And I guess a big part of this residency for me is to continue exploring AI and just to provide a bit more context to that for me as I continue to explore the medium and also explore the intersections between AI and photography in that kind of collaboration between like machine and person.
Yeah, great to talk to you again, Claudia. I remember our dinner, and actually at that point you were talking about cyanotype work as something that you wanted to do, but I don't think you had done it yet. So it's exciting to hear that you've been working on that. And then, yeah, Runway ML is great. Cristobal Valenzuela is a pretty good friend of mine that actually started it. It's been fun to watch it grow and see people make amazing things with it. So great to talk to you again.
Deno?
Oh, hello. Are you listening?
Yep.
Yes.
Can you see? Okay. Hi, my name is Deno, and I'm a non-binary visual artist from Brazil. My work has been a process between video making, music production, and now I've been into a long journey through 3D visuals, where I found like profound happiness by doing. I found myself like doing 3D. I can do this like for the rest of my life. My work goes through fantasy and video games aesthetics and creating atmospheres from different worlds. And yeah, I think that's it. Nice to meet all of you, and I'm really excited to the program.
Fantastic. Nice to meet you, Dano. And that sounds like really interesting work. There's a lot of amazing artists coming out of Brazil, so hope to make it down there someday.
Art sample?
Hi, Artnome. I was also at Montreal. We had briefly interacted. This is before I knew anything about you. I remember just saying you look very interesting, and then I think you laughed or something, and then we walked away from each other. But anyways, I'm a lens-based artist based in Montreal right now, but I'm from Toronto. What I do is I essentially just walk around with my camera and try and find different like textures and forms that I find interesting. You know, it could be like some bark on a tree or something like that. And then I'll take photos of these things and then bring them into Photoshop, sort of collage them together, and make various new forms. So yeah, that's about me. I'm happy to be here. It's nice to be able to get the chance to speak with you. And yeah.
Yeah, no, great to talk to you again. It's a strong Montreal contingent here for sure. And I spend a lot of my life driving into work at startups in Boston and driving home and not having a lot of time to make art for the last couple decades. But one of the things I did do is I take a lot of pictures of pavement on the ground. And because it's something I can do, it's easy, and it keeps me occupied and interested. So textures, big fan of photography of textures and things like that. So cool sounding work. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I love. Nice to meet you too. I love like concrete. It's a nice background.
For sure.
Slash, like even just like picking out the different textures from within the concrete. Anyways, I'll let the next person go.
Now Ismael?
Hey guys, well, happy Friday, first of all. I'm Isma, I'm based in Spain at the moment. I study architecture and I've been working as an architect specialized in computational design for a while. Now I do digital design and automation. And what I do with NFTs is mostly generative art, very inspired in geometry and architectural stuff, basically. Lately I've been minting quite a bit in FX Hash, having a lot of fun. And a funny note, the other day I was playing around with this. There's like this website. There's a tool made by Sankan to check, the different pieces in FX Hash. And I had this collection that is called Postcard CPT. And Artnome, you are like the largest collection. You have like 12 or 13 pieces of that. So quite nice talking to you in person. Yeah, nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you and nice to meet you as well. I love that particular collection. And I saw that there were a bunch available, and I was like, I'm just going to buy all of them. But they remind me a lot of early 20th century painting, like Stuart Davis type painting. So, yeah, thanks for making the great collection, and it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Jean?
Hi Artnome, I'm a French artist who work mostly with drawing, printmaking. I used to do other stuff. I live in countryside. I'm really interested in ways of living out of the grid stuff, or I make a lot of music too. I'm really stressed with this Discord stuff, so sorry for being a bit messy in the way I express myself, but I'm not really used to that way of communicating yet, as I'm also new in social media and all that kind of thing. I'm really enthusiastic with NFT, especially because I'm quite an outsider in art world. I don't rely to the institutional art scene. So yes, I don't know what to say more now.
Nice to meet you. I think you're in the right spot if you don't fit in the traditional art world. I think a lot of us that started to build this movement around crypto art and NFTs 4 years ago, our goal was really to build, quite honestly, was to build a new art world, because we felt like the old one wasn't really serving people. So hopefully, the question that still remains if the new one is actually serving artists either. So there's still work to be done, but hopefully it'll be a good fit for you. And don't feel bad about Discord. I find it super confusing as well. Nice to meet you.
Definitely, with a closed mic and you don't see people. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Evie?
Sorry, did you call me or?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm really sorry, but I have no idea what you're actually doing because I just arrived. Are we doing like a second introduction?
Yeah, just so I'm going to go into the history of crypto art today, but for me, the exciting part is that I get to meet everybody. So I know you guys probably already did introductions on your first call, but this is just selfishly, this is just so that I get to meet everybody. Just maybe a little bit about your background and who you are.
Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Evelina. I'm from Bulgaria. And I'm mostly specialized in video and in animation, both 2D and 3D, but I'm also doing some video mapping, and I'm trying to learn to do interactive installations. And yeah, I'm kind of new to crypto. I only participated in 1 or 2 crypto exhibitions last year. And as a digital artist, I really empathize with the whole concept, and yeah, I don't know what else I can say.
No, that's fine. And it's Evelina?
Yeah, you can call me Evie for short.
Evie. Okay, nice to meet you, Evie.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Great. Luis, Ricardo?
Yes, thank you. I am Luis Ricardo from Mexico. I've been to Montreal once for our honeymoon. Yeah, well, I studied filmmaking, and I can't code yet, but I am very interested in your work, and of course in what you write, which is well, very insightful. Not many voices in Twitter are really thinking of the possibilities, I think, or I have not been able to find, or sometimes I get lost because I have ADD. Well, I want to tell you very quickly that yesterday I'm kind of worried because yesterday I read this Osho link, and the first thing I read was people start losing their sexual life at 42, and I am turning 42 very soon, so it was like very weird. Yeah, so it doesn't have to do anything with this, and I am running out of time. But what I want to really say is that I'm also doing this gen art with, but I can't code. I am very lazy for this, so I use this Wombo art. But I don't want to be using that. I want to control that and not only modify what is the outcome of a easy website. I want to learn how to make things like you said in your website. I'm sorry about being very long.
Yeah, no, don't apologize at all. It's nice to meet you, Luis. The very first NFT I ever collected was by an artist named O'Hara Gonzalez, who's from Mexico. So I have a soft spot for NFT artists in Mexico. I think there's quite a few actually that come from down there. And my wife has ADD, so I'm familiar with people that have ADD. Actually, I think I have a lot of people with ADD in my life that are friends and family members that I love. So nice to meet you.
Okay, Michael?
Hi, Jason. Nice to meet you. We also haven't met in Montreal because I've never been to Canada, but maybe another time. I don't know. I sometimes try to encourage you to go swimming in wintertime on your Twitter feed, but that's not really meeting. But maybe one day you pick me up on that.
I love it.
My background is stop motion animation. Done that for quite a while, but with my NFTs, I'm sort of more doing After Effects stuff, like little animated loops in black and white foremost. Maybe one day I'm brave enough to do color, but I'm not really that confident, I think, in that one. And yeah, sort of, I gave myself this little limitation, like when I started to just start every piece with like a black square and take it from there. So I'm not sure how long I'll continue doing that, but for now, that's what I do, basically.
Cool. Yeah, I think sometimes limitations or restrictions are the best way to draw out creativity, right? Working within sort of limitations. I like that idea of the black square, and After Effects is a remarkably powerful tool, has been for a long time. And I guess lastly, I'm staring at the frozen lake out my office window, and as soon as the ice breaks up, I think I might go for a cold dip. So I'm sure I'll post it.
I think you should.
But nice to meet you.
And you.
Okay, Patricia?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Artnome. Jason, nice to meet you. Definitely seen you around. I'm excited to hear about the history of the space. So I studied architecture actually a while ago, and I'm a bit more in the storytelling space now. And one of the projects I'm working on is with Bedouin communities in the West Bank, essentially kind of working to digitize some spaces and landscapes that are disappearing in the real world, bringing them into the metaverse. And yeah, so kind of working with like digitizing sort of disappearing cultures and stories from the real world into the virtual, and doing that through a VR project, but I'm kind of creating NFTs of 3D models of sort of the large projects, but yeah, essentially in this storytelling space, digitizing kind of disappearing histories, and doing that in kind of contexts like the West Bank, but also doing that sort of working with personal memory through some kind of more traditional documentary formats. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, good to meet you. So are you using like photogrammetry?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, so we're using photogrammetry for the scanning and volumetric capture, for also just capturing like some of the like sort of like fragile cultural heritage, like weaving and just ceremonies, rituals that happen, but will maybe become obsolete in the next generation or two. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting that, a lot of times I worry about how our digital culture is sort of frail, like how when Flash went away, we lost the ability to play a lot of the art and ads and animations from the late 90s, early 2000s. But the idea of using digital as a way to preserve the physical is actually really interesting, and it makes some sense to me. So interesting work. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. And yeah, excited to hear the talk. Thank you.
Dominic?
Hey Jason, nice to meet you. So I'm Dominic, currently based in Stockholm, and I've been working with generative art for maybe the past 15 years. Started with my own custom stuff like C and C++, and then gradually moved on from there to processing, P5.js, such stuff. And in recent years, I've become this like massive Houdini fan. So I've spent a lot of time jumping between the gen art stuff with processing and the sort of procedural, almost gen art things that you can make with Houdini as well as regular 3D rendering. But yeah, mostly Houdini lately. It's become my big sort of rabbit hole that I can't leave.
Neat. So I wondered, when I studied Maya a million years ago, it had its own programming language that I got into briefly called Mel. Does Houdini have sort of its own programming language? Is that how you're making sort of these procedural 3D animations?
Yeah, I mean, it has all that node-based stuff, which is like very common. And it has this language called Vex, which sort of allows you to either make sort of shader effects or work with geometry. It's like super powerful and flexible, and you can make gen art with it. You just don't get the real time things, so you can't like art blocks or FX hash. But that whole sort of aspect of being able to program in a gen art way your 3D stuff and then render it like with beautiful rendering that takes like 48 hours to render, that's like really attractive to me. So I really love jumping between one and the other, and I have this sort of consistent thing in the middle, which is like called
You might have dropped off there.
yeah, sorry. I have this really bad connection for some reason. Where did I drop?
Just you said there was something consistent in the middle, but yeah,
I was just saying like it's the code part, which is like the consistency between gen art and like the fact you can code within Houdini, which is like that and Python. So that's the interesting part for me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, very cool. Yeah, I'd like to talk to you more about it sometime. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, cool. Perfect.
Okay, we are almost there.
Hey, Jason.
Okay.
Hi, Jason. Nice to meet you. I've never been to Canada either, but I do have a couple of cousins in Toronto. I really like what you do. As everyone has touched on, really, you're a really important voice in the culture. I'm from a background in animation, illustration. I work predominantly with drawing. Over lockdown, I've kind of developed a series that I'm working on at the moment, which is all about creating little rocks and rural idols. Sometimes they're animated, sometimes they're still, working with programs like Loom and Procreate and After Effects and pens. So yeah, it's just great to be here, really, and great to meet you. I'm really looking forward to the talk.
Fantastic. Yeah, really great to meet you as well. And where did you say you were from again?
I'm in the UK. I'm based in
okay.
London, but yeah,
Great.
in the UK.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Santiago?
Hi, Jason. Hi, guys. Can you listen to me fine?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yes.
Cool. I'm Santiago. I'm from Uruguay. I was a painter and a drawings person for many years and with some interest in digital art, and now I'm kind of a digital painter. I do SVGs. I do these scalable, cool paintings. And I also run a little anti-PFP project. It's like sort of one more joke about the PFP situation and world. And I do other stuff in the NFT space. It's great to be here listening to you.
Great to meet you, Santiago. And yeah, my training was as a painter as well. My undergraduate degree was in painting and sculpture back in the 90s. So I always find it interesting when painters go into digital work. I think you can almost see it in their work, that training and knowledge and background that painters have when it carries over to the digital. Nice to meet you.
Great.
Looks like we're down to the last person, last but not least.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yep, with
that's me.
Zala here.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Yes, perfectly.
Sure. Okay. Hi, my name is Zala. I'm from Brazil, and I'm an artist, and I'm psychologist. And I have been painting for almost 10 years, and most of my work is painting, drawings, and some sculptures. And most of them come from reflections that I have of my life and my existence. So I make this visual in a lot of combinations of colors and shapes, and always trying to do something new or a new scene. So always following my creative process and my moments as well. So, and recently I'm doing some digital art and some animations, but still pretty new to me. So I'm learning. And I think that being Brazilian in the NFT world is also a big thing. So I have a lot of inspirations, and I love being in the NFT world. And I have been here for almost 6 months, I guess. And I love the community and all the stuff that is around the crypto world. And I'm very excited for this class.
Awesome, great to meet you, Zala. And yeah, it's been great to hear everybody's different backgrounds, and I think you touched a bit on the community, and that's why I'm here. That's why I came in 4 years ago, I guess more than 4 years ago now, and we'll talk about that a bit in the presentation. So I think, Matilda, I think I just hit screen share or the screen button here. Let's see.
Yes.
And then I'll hit share, and then I'm gonna go here. And can folks see my screen?
I can see it.
Great. So I usually like to present my slides in this mode versus full screen so I can see what is coming up next. And you'll see I include a lot of art in the presentation from friends and people that I collect within the community. So the background image is by Mohara Gonzalez. It's the I Want My NFT artwork that he made that I actually have on a t-shirt that I wear quite a bit. So Mohara, as I mentioned earlier, was the first artist that I collected in the NFT space way back in 2017. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. In terms of my background, so I was an artist that grew up in a family of engineers. All I ever wanted to do was make art. I went to art school for undergrad, graduated, couldn't find a job. Ended up working in tech for the next 20 years, but went back to school nights, got an MFA in a more digital art type program. So really was kind of born into this intersection of art and tech. I guess 5 or 6 years ago now, I started Artnome as a blog to write about art and tech. Around 2017, wrote my first article about blockchain that we'll talk about a little bit later, and became part of the community. It kind of grew from there. Since then, last year, I started an initiative called the Green NFTs Initiative. We raised $100,000 and helped educate artists around some of the issues about how to engage with NFTs in a more efficient way. Have launched a company as of this year called Club NFT that focuses on a lot of my concerns around infrastructure issues with NFTs and off-chain assets. It's pretty nerdy stuff, but basically NFTs don't really work the way most people think they do, and a lot of collectors in particular need to know a little bit more about how to protect and take care of their NFTs. So you can always read more about that on clubnft.com. And we just launched a new editorial as part of Club NFT, but it has sort of editorial independence, called Right Click Save. That's designed also, just like Club NFT, it's designed to help educate collectors and artists, not only on the technical issues, but really to take more of a traditional art lens and art criticism and apply it to this NFT space, because we feel like that's missing. So we want to treat NFT artists, crypto artists, and NFT collectors with the same respect that is afforded to traditional art collectors and artists, because we think that's a missing piece in the community. And then the image is a Podmork, I believe as he calls them, or they call them, by Hackatow. They're an Italian couple, one of the first artists on Super Rare. I introduced them to Super Rare, and as a thank you, they made this sort of custom sculpture. It's one of my favorite prized possessions. It sits on my mantle at home. So where I like to start is kind of just what is an NFT, and I won't get super nerdy or technical. I find you kind of lose people when you do that. The way I describe NFTs is that a bunch of us, 4 or 5 years ago, were thinking, is there a way that we could take the same properties that we saw being associated with Bitcoin and Ethereum, where they were able to prove out an entire global marketplace around digital scarcity by being able to prove that there are only so many tokens created within these economies? Could we take that same property of digital scarcity and apply it to digital art? Because all of my friends that were making digital art were really struggling and having a hard time there. So it's an NFT stands for non-fungible token. It's actually a bit of code that sits on the blockchain. Sometimes people call the blockchain a distributed ledger, but I think that's also confusing. It doesn't really clarify things for most people. The blockchain is essentially a database. It's a distributed database that is really good at storing transactions in a way that is permanent and immutable, which means that it's hard to change them. So this becomes good to prove out digital scarcity, but also for things like provenance, when you want to be able to track something over time as it changes hands. The Bitcoin blockchain starts in 2009. So it's launched by Satoshi Nakamoto, so sort of a famous figure, but no one actually knows who she or he is. This past year, I've had the pleasure of actually becoming pretty good friends with the two guys that invented the blockchain. So the invention of the blockchain actually goes back to the 90s, and it's Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber. A lot of people think Satoshi Nakamoto invented the blockchain because you hear so much about Bitcoin, but it's actually Scott and Stuart that invented it back in the 90s. And if you read the Bitcoin white paper, which I encourage you to read, 3, I think, of the 7 references in the front of the white paper are actually to the work that was done by Scott and Stuart. But Bitcoin, after the 2007-2008 financial collapse, people sort of didn't really trust centralized entities as much to sort of manage their wealth. And right at the perfect time, Bitcoin comes out and as a decentralized solution, and people sort of embrace it, and it grows over time, and it becomes an important sort of core part of the culture for crypto art and crypto artists. So a lot of the philosophies and the culture, carried over in the early days from folks that were sort of investing in cryptocurrency. Maybe less so now. There are a lot of people that come into NFTs that aren't necessarily that big into crypto or don't really care about blockchain, but in the early days, it was really a big part of it. So the earliest crypto art, I think you could argue, is probably works that people were making ASCII art directly on the blockchain itself. So a thing to know about blockchains, they're not great at storing large files. That's why you'll learn that when you make your NFTs, typically the actual images or video files or things like that are typically stored somewhere else, ideally on a decentralized storage platform like IPFS. So in the early days, people were using, given that you can't put large files on the blockchain economically, people were playing around just using characters and numbers in order to make artwork. So this is a tribute to Len Sassman, who is a cryptographer, and someone created this image and actually put it on the blockchain as a tribute to him when he passed away. So that's 2011. It's not really until 2014 that we see what I would consider sort of the beginning of the proto NFTs or the early NFTs. I should pause here and say, I usually say this up front, you're going to get my version of crypto art history and NFT history. It's biased based on my experiences. So there's a lot of other people that would start in different spots and would highlight other different work. But this is sort of, my presentation is skewed largely to my understanding and experience of the history, particularly once we get to 2017, I'm really telling it sort of first person from my view. But yeah, in 2014, Kevin McCoy and Anil Dash create the Quantum, which a lot of people consider the first NFT. I don't get too fussed about who actually made the first NFT. There's sort of a whole thing going on in NFTs that I call firstism, where people get, it's the first this kind of NFT, the first that, like the first French toast NFT, the first, NFT, and I think it's kind of absurd. I don't think first actually matters quite that much in terms of an adjective, and I think there's really, like with a lot of inventions, there are a lot of people kind of working on things, around the same time that kind of come together to help birth the whole idea of NFTs. But it's, let's see, January, February, March, April, May, I guess May-ish, that monograph comes out, and the Quantum NFT is sort of created and announced. It was recently sold at Sotheby's, I believe, and in the news right now, there's a lot of discussion because it was created using Namecoin, which almost operates like a domain name where you have to renew it. And Kevin hadn't renewed it, and then so he like relaunched it under a new token and sold it at Sotheby's. But someone actually owns the original token and had renewed it, so there's a lawsuit going on. So there's all these interesting things that kind of, when you have a new technology like this, and people don't quite know how to handle all the different situations. That's part of what I think keeps it engaging and interesting for me is, we're all kind of learning together and defining what this is still. 2014, Ria Myers, Ethereum, this contract is art. Instead of trying to put an image and somehow mentally convince people that it's tied to the blockchain or tied to a token, Ray is exploring the contract itself being the artwork. So it's more like conceptual artwork. Ray is a super important artist that continues to sort of lead the way in making some really impressive conceptual artwork that is blockchain related, but certainly is one of the first people doing important work in the space. Nili Lerner often gets left out of the conversation, so I always make it a point to bring Nili in. I think she's brilliant. And if we're going to rewrite a new art history around crypto art, I'd like to make sure that we don't leave women out like we did for so long in traditional art history. So Nili actually in 2014 is also doing sort of a conceptual art project where she is one of the first to argue that the token itself is the artwork. So it was a work that had to do with sort of corporate brands. And she's on this blockchain forum where all these folks that are super crypto savvy and understand Bitcoin were there, but even they didn't understand what she was doing. So they actually thought she was a scam and they were telling people to take down her post and not to pay attention. But essentially, she's describing one of the earliest, closest things to what we now all accept as NFTs today. And is sort of an unsung hero in my opinion. So her project was called Nili Coins. It's 2014. And I like this quote. She says that money can change your life, but you can change what money is. So she's really thinking about the NFT, the token itself, as being art. It should say 2015. Let's see. So Bitcoin. Sarah Meojas, she actually basically tied her physical photography back to the blockchain where you could invest in her as an artist. Is one of the first people to sort of think of it in terms of almost like a stock market or giving people a way to invest in the artists themselves instead of just the artwork. I know she's going to be doing a talk next Monday at Twitter Spaces that folks should join. I'm going to try to join as well. But doing really interesting and early work in 2015 and got a fair amount of attention, back then when some of the other projects maybe didn't get as much interest or attention. So was doing really important work. but it's not really until we get to Rare Pepe Wallet that that this moves from being sort of one-off experiments to really a more community-driven thing. So Rare Pepe Wallet, a super important project. So it's built by Joe Looney around the idea initially that memes in the meme economy could be a real thing. Pepe is sort of this meme that everybody was like doing variations on to express all sorts of different ideas. And up front, it was almost like a joke. What if you could buy and sell memes? You know, the idea of a meme economy was actually a meme itself. And Joe and some other folks thought, well, why not? Why not be able to use the same, you know, principles that we have behind Bitcoin to create counterparty tokens that you could use and buy and sell and trade from artists? And Joe still, I think to this day, thinks very much that he would argue that the token itself is the artwork. So the images are just what the token looks like, but the token is the thing that you're buying, selling, trading. And you know, and he continues to make that argument. The marketplace is important because the Rare Pepe marketplace is pretty much what all modern NFT marketplaces are based on. They all owe a debt of gratitude to Rare Pepe Wallet. The entire concept of an NFT marketplace didn't really exist, and this sort of pioneered many ideas like hidden content and music NFTs and NFTs that change state based on, you know, which computer is looking at them. So I strongly encourage folks to read up on it and check it out. And I think this is sort of the start of the more social movement. I usually add the disclaimer, so, you know, not everybody knows the background about Rare Pepe. For a while, it was associated with the alt-right in the United States. So it was sort of a dark chapter in the Rare Pepe history. But it's important for folks to know that there are lots and lots of artists who embrace Pepe and Pepe's relationship to early crypto art that you know, really have nothing to do with that sort of alt-right history that's out there. And in fact, they argue that you know, if we let it be seen as a hate symbol, we've sort of lost the battle on that front. So Rare Pepe, if you see it and you don't really understand the background or you only know it as a hate symbol, it's really core to sort of the history of NFTs, NFT marketplaces, and the community. And Joe's a really important figure in that history. So Curio cards. So Rare Pepe Wallet was built on Counterparty, which is Bitcoin based. Curio cards is actually the first Ethereum based marketplace. So Travis Uhrig, who is really active in the sort of San Francisco Bitcoin and Ethereum community, built out a platform. And I should say, I didn't mention it on Rare Pepe Wallet, but both Rare Pepe Wallet and Curio cards did not take any commission at all from artists. So one of the things you need to know about how crypto culture and decentralization philosophy kind of transferred over into these early NFTs. The idea in cryptocurrency was sort of to remove the middleman and you know, get rid of the bankers and give power back to the people and the individual. So a lot of the early folks, like the people that built Rare Pepe Wallet and Curio cards, felt that you know, the artists shouldn't have to give up any of the money, right? So they built these platforms and encouraged artists to put their art on there, and they took zero commission from any of the artists. And that kind of carries over from cryptocurrency culture. And we've seen as more and more marketplaces come out, you know, the artists maybe have to pay higher and higher commissions, but there are still folks like Matt Kane and Sparrow in the community, or Dada NYC, who later on added royalties, who are fighting for sort of artists' rights to make sure that the commissions don't go too high for the marketplaces, and that artists get fair royalties. So that's really rooted in sort of the cultural history of crypto art and NFTs. Then that same year, 2017, the same year that Curio cards came out, the CryptoPunks launch. So CryptoPunks, I think everybody knows what they are now. You know, Matt and John are good friends of mine. They put out these 10,000, or I guess 9,000 of the 10,000 punks out for free for anyone who wanted to claim them. It almost seems like a cliche now, because after 2021, we've seen so many 10,000, one of 10,000 PFP projects, right? But the crazy thing is, back in 2017, when I first saw these, this was remarkably innovative, right? It wasn't like they built CryptoPunks based on this idea of 10,000K, the PFP projects. There was no such thing, right? So they're really pioneers, and even though it almost seems cliche now because so many people have kind of stolen their format or used their format, they really are a remarkable and important part of crypto art history. A lot of people sort of start the story of NFTs and crypto art with CryptoPunks, and I wouldn't agree with that. I think there's a lot of stuff that happens before then that's important, but they're certainly really important, and maybe the first really popular NFT. So it captures people's imagination. A market evolves sort of organically around them pretty quickly. New stories come out, and it really, for a lot of people, it's the first time we start hearing about art on the blockchain before we were really even calling it NFTs. Another super early project, Dada NYC in 2017. So it's Bea Ramos and Judy Mam and Abraham Milano. So they had built a drawing tool that had been around, I think, 3 or 4 years before they started trying to do NFTs. And this tool allowed hundreds and thousands of artists all around the world to draw pictures and then continue that drawing and sort of add on to each other's drawings. It's a really beautiful project where people don't necessarily have to speak the same language because they have the visual language of art, and they're able to sort of build these long strips where they continue each other's language. And Bea had been fascinated with the idea, and still is to this day, of how can we build an economy for artists that covers the costs of living without commodifying their art, or having them create art just for the sake of it being sold. So she's concerned, as I think a lot of us are, that when art becomes just about money, the quality of the art or the ideas or topics that get explored often sort of narrow. So she was pretty ahead of her day back in 2017 to start thinking about how could she involve sort of tokens and NFTs in their drawing platform, and actually worked with Matt and John, which a lot of people don't know, from CryptoPunks, to make the Dada NYC contract. And it was the first contract that actually had artist royalties for secondary sales baked into it. So a really historic and important project. I consider Bea and Judy to be the soul, heart and soul of the sort of crypto art movement. We see Rare Art Labs as what I would probably consider the first commercial marketplace. So again, Rare Pepe Wallet and Curio Cards were not charging artists, and Rare Art Labs had like raised money, and it was like actually a slightly easier to use and more professional interface, and saw that there was an opportunity here, but also were really important to the development of the culture, in that by late 2017, Joe from Rare Pepe and Matt and John from CryptoPunks and Bea from Dada NYC and John from Rare and Tommy Nichols, actually, who's a really important figure that people don't talk about much from Rare Art Labs as well, all came together and said, look, we have all these independent communities and projects, and it feels like there's something big going on here. We're not really sure what it is, but we should throw an event. So they all came together and threw an event in New York City that we'll talk about in a little bit, called Rare AF. And while Rare Art Labs is no longer here, you can think of them almost as like a predecessor to Super Rare and Known Origin, or arguably even OpenSea. So it was actually in late 2017 when I first got involved. So I had been writing about machine learning and art and all kinds of anything that had to do with the intersection of art and tech for several years at that point, and had pretty good SEO and a pretty good following, but hadn't really taken any interest in the blockchain. Didn't actually know what it was, other than having heard of Bitcoin. But a machine learning friend of mine named Ahmed Hosni, who I really respect, said, you really have to look at blockchain. And I was like, that sounds like it's about money. I'm more interested in art and tech. I don't really think it's going to be my thing. But he kept pushing me. So on a Saturday, I did 2 or 3 hours worth of research. I bought this NFT from Dada NYC, a couple of CryptoKitties, a couple of CryptoPunks, and it immediately hit me even after a couple hours of research because I knew the problems of the art world really well. And it only took a couple hours of research in the blockchain for me to make this connection that the blockchain could really help solve a lot of core problems from the traditional art world that has sort of been plaguing me personally for a long time. So in that article, I talk up front about these 4 things that I think that the blockchain could really help with. So driving digital art sales through digital scarcity, the problem being that people weren't really buying digital art because they felt like it was something that you couldn't own and that you could just see for free. And the ability to sort of bring over digital scarcity for things like Bitcoin over to art seemed really promising. Democratizing fine art investment. So I'll never be able to afford to buy a Picasso painting, but there's this idea of fractional ownership that becomes interesting when you overlay the blockchain with art. So almost like stocks in a company, if I can't buy a Picasso painting, but maybe me and 200,000 other people can fractionalize it and buy a portion of it. Improving provenance. So at that point, I had spent 3 years, nights and weekends, building the world's largest database of complete works by 20th century artists. That's probably a topic for another time, but let's just say that I was obsessed with provenance and forgery. And it was really clear that when you have an immutable record, this unchangeable record on the blockchain, there's a lot of value there in terms of being able to track the artwork and making sure that it's authentic from the artist to each collector moving forward. And then creating a more ethical way of paying artists. So this idea of baking in royalties so that as an artist's artwork goes up in value, they get to participate in that success instead of just watching somebody else make all the money off of their labor and their work. So I should say, after I wrote that article, I went to bed, I woke up the next day, and I had 100 emails because it was late 2017, early 2018, and it was a crazy crypto bull market going on, and everyone was searching to try to find information. CryptoKitties had just become popular to try to find information about art on the blockchain, or rares, as we were calling them back then. We didn't call them NFTs until later. And my article, within 24 hours, had become the first article, the first search result on Google. So everyone that was looking up for information on this was reaching out to me. And I thought, oh crap, I'm not really an expert in blockchain at all. I had only done 2 or 3 hours worth of research, but clearly there's a lot of interest in this space. So I can either tell everyone I actually am not an expert and don't know much about this, or I can become part of the community and try to learn from experts, right? And I thought it was a promising enough space that it made sense for me to see if there was a way I could engage with the community. So sheer luck and coincidence for me, 2 weeks later, probably the most important event, well, definitely I would say the most important event in crypto art and NFT history was set up to happen in New York City. So that's Rare AF. I went to Rare AF and I met Matt and John, the inventors of the CryptoPunks. We became very close friends. I met Bea and Judy from Dada NYC, and I didn't know anybody, and they introduced me to a lot of people and were very kind to me. And I really respected their ideas and thoughts about the space. Joe Looney gave what I would argue is the most important demo in NFT and crypto art history. There are things that Joe built in Rare Pepe wallet that the other marketplaces are still trying to catch up with 6-7 years later. So these were the core folks. Everyone thought that this Rare AF conference, I guess, or it was really, they thought it was going to be more like a meetup. And they expected there would be maybe 10, 15, 20 other nerds, right, that were working on this kind of stuff. There were actually a couple hundred people in there, and it was just, you could feel sort of in the air that was like, it was almost like, I think the way Bea says it was almost like a movement was being born when you think about artistic movements. So yeah, it was sort of the seminal event, the event where we realized this isn't just a few nerdy, people working on projects here and there around the world. This is like the beginning of a new movement. So coming out of Rare AF, I tried to define, this whole movement. Like, what is crypto art? Is it, are there qualities that can actually be thought of to be applicable back in, early 2018 across what's going on, because it seemed like the range of work was so broad. So I wrote an article called "What is Crypto Art?" And between that article and my article about the blockchain art market being here, for a couple of years, I kind of dominated Google search results. So a lot of the artists that came in 2018 and 19 came in as a result of having read my work. So just real quickly, high level crypto art, sort of my definition at the time was that it was digitally native, geographically agnostic, so people could participate from all around the world, democratic and permissionless. You didn't need to go to a gallery or some sort of centralized authority to get permission to participate. Again, decentralized, anonymous. So a lot of artists that come from countries where they'd have to worry about the kind of art that they're making could have sell art, create art, and put it out there under a pseudonym to protect their identity. Mimetic. So a lot of early crypto art had to do with memes. It was sort of born out of memes, like the rare Pepe wallet. Self-referential. So the early crypto art and early NFTs, a lot of the people were coming from that crypto background. So there was a lot of art about things like the Bitcoin pizza incident, and things that were sort of stories that came out of crypto. Crypto patrons. So the early collectors, and I would argue still the majority of the big collectors in NFT and crypto art space, are people that have made a fair amount of money, investing in cryptocurrency, and there actually aren't that many ways to spend cryptocurrency or that many things to buy. So crypto art became sort of an obvious choice, and it's a way to sort of invest back into the culture. So it's sort of a new type of patron. Pro artist. So I don't see that, sadly, as much as I did back in 2018. I don't see that as much today. But if you think about those early platforms that were taking zero commission from the artist, I mean, that's pretty pro artist, and baking in the automated royalties. And then dankness was sort of my definition of dankness, which is that crypto art, instead of judging people based on how long they've gone to art school or how talented they are or how much better they are than another artist, crypto art was really open to everybody. So instead of judging you based on how much skill or technique you had, back then we were judging each other based on how expressive the work was, right? So it was a way to sort of flatten it and make it accessible to everybody. Another article I wrote back then was called "Blockchain Artists Wanted." So I like to include this one because it's actually people can't really believe how different things were back then. So because a lot of these marketplaces all started popping up around the same time, Known Origin and Super Rare, and the Rare Arts one was still up, and there were a couple of other things going on. There was actually an artist shortage in early 2018. So there were more platforms than there were artists, and I had to write an article saying basically like, hey, artists, you can come and make money on these platforms, and they're not going to take any commission because they're competing to try to get artists in. Of course, now we have marketplaces where there's a line of artists waiting to get into the platform, but it was literally the opposite back then. So in this article, I talked about how I made $800 on this silly Rare Pepe meme that I created. Like, I intentionally made this like bad and fast because I thought it was like, that's the aesthetic or whatever. I posted it, thought like there's no way anyone's going to buy these, and then I just on a whim checked a week later and I made $800. That's actually more than I had made at that point in my entire life as an artist. So on this silly little meme, and that's when I realized like, hey, there's something here. So Super Rare launches and becomes sort of the marketplace. Super Rare and Known Origin. A lot of these folks that were launching these marketplaces don't necessarily come from an art background. So Super Rare reached out to me, and I actually introduced them to their first several artists. I was the first collector on Super Rare, and it was because I really wanted to collect this artwork by AI/ML artist Robbie Barrett. So I sort of fell in love with this work, and there weren't a lot of ways to collect digital art back then. And I thought, well, why don't I make the introduction and I'll purchase this work? So that's how I ended up collecting the first, I think, 4 or 5 Super Rare tokens, which I've since sold way too early. They're probably worth millions of dollars now. But hey, I get to be part of the history. And shortly after that, I was invited to London to talk at a Christie's event and tell people in the traditional art world about NFTs and art and blockchain. And this story has sort of become sort of folklore or famous within the crypto art community. But basically, I worked with Super Rare to give out 300 NFTs on these cards, and each one had a frame of a single work by Robbie Barrett. So we were sitting on the stage. This is me and Matt Hall from CryptoPunks, and Judy from Dada, and John from Rare, and Masha from Ascribe, which I should include a slide on Ascribe. They were a very, very early platform that should also be in this history pitch. But here we are talking to hundreds of sort of traditional art world collectors, and we're trying to explain to them how the future is going to be about collecting digital art. And they're looking at us like we are completely nuts, right? So there's this video that's still out there where I told them, like, hey, you know, this is the way people are going to collect art in the future. Digital art's the most important art of our generation. Robbie's an amazing artist. You know, I'm giving you all a card with an NFT in your goodie bag. Do not throw it away. I will buy it off you if you don't want it. So, of course, 3 years later, something like, 280 or 270 of them were like thrown away because, people didn't know what the heck we were talking about. But now they sell, the people, when they find them, they sell for around $1 million each. So we sort of accidentally created a $300 million market on a giveaway. But that's also considered, the reason I include it is because a lot of people consider this really the introduction of the idea of NFTs to the art world was at this Christie's event. And at the time, there was also a lot of talk about other ways. At this event, they were interested in blockchain, but they were thinking, how do you use blockchain to track traditional physical art, for things like provenance? So Nana Decking with Artery and Jess with Codex were there and talking about, we don't really want to collect necessarily this digital art stuff, but the real use of the blockchain at that conference was about, how do we use it to track physical items? So then I like to think about the evolution of the space in terms of rare AFs. So rare AF 1 was really like, what is this that we have? And after rare AF 1, the question was, can we get enough artists, right? There were more platforms than there were artists. By a year later, when we go to rare AF 2, we have a lot of artists and we have a lot of platforms, but the question becomes, can we get enough collectors? Because at the time, cryptocurrency was tanking. It was after the ICO stuff was going on. And Rare AF2 was actually probably, a quarter the size of Rare AF1 because it was no longer the exciting and cool thing to do. But what was neat about it, it was back down to only the people that really, really cared about the movement showed up for Rare AF2. And we asked ourselves out loud, will NFTs even be a thing a year from now? Because there was so little interest. It was like a downtime. But it really gave artists and the builders the chance to take their time and think through the work they were making and the platforms they were building and how we wanted to build the culture together. So if we see a crash again, and I'm sure we will, don't necessarily worry about it, because a lot of times it's the down years when things are most fun. So we did start to see collectors after Rare AF2. Initially, it was a handful of whales. We call the collectors that spend a lot of money in the space whales. And we didn't see anything near like what we saw in 2021, but we had enough collectors to sort of sustain us. And then that small market carried over, and in Rare AF3 in 2020, the question became, okay, we have artists, we have marketplaces, we have collectors, but a lot of the people from the traditional art world are telling us it's not really a market until you see secondary sales, right? So can we get a secondary market going where a collector could buy work by an artist and then sell it again? Because we had made a big deal about sort of royalties and things like that. So that's when we started to see pickup, in late 2020, where there were more and more artists coming in and the more and more collectors. And we actually did see a secondary market evolve, and people started offering me some pretty large sums of money for some of the earliest NFTs in the space, and we kind of evolved that secondary market, which led up to the Beeple sale in 2021. So that became sort of the entry point for most people in the world to what an NFT was. Prior to that, it's a bunch of us nerds trying to build a new art world that's more fair and sustainable for artists. Then the Beeple sale hits. Everyone comes running to learn more about it because it's a story about a lot of money, and people can't figure out why a JPEG would sell for that much. And I start getting a lot of questions around this time from people saying, well, what's really new here? You know, this is a white male artist selling an artwork from a 200-year-old auction house for an outrageous sum of money. That's just like the old art world. Like, you guys didn't build anything new. That's just the old art world. And, you know, I had to go and explain, this is when I started explaining the history to people, that, you know, we had actually built sort of an altruistic movement around the idea of artists' rights, and that, you know, one large sale from, you know, Christie's or Sotheby's isn't necessarily reflecting, you know, what the core of our community or our culture is about. So that's been sort of an ongoing battle. It's you know, on the one hand, that sale did us a favor because it brought the rest of the world into the NFT space, and there are a lot more collectors, which means that a lot more artists can sell work, and, you know, it was a way to spread the word. But on the other hand, it didn't necessarily carry the principles that we were trying to develop forward, and it kind of accelerated the idea that NFTs are only about money. So we saw after the Beeple sale, things like Saturday Night Live doing you know, skits on non-fungible tokens. It was on Ellen. It was all over the place. It became like this massive thing where, I don't know, 2020, I'm going to make up the number because I don't actually know it, but I want to say probably a couple $1 million total in art NFT sales. And then 2021, they're calling it a $40 billion NFT market. So it arguably grew too fast, and there were a lot of growing pains that I think we're still living through and trying to retain the early version of our crypto art culture. Just do a quick time check here. Okay, yeah, I think I have till 2:30. Another thing that surfaced, my friend Memo Aitken did some deep research into NFTs around that same time, and wrote sort of a scathing paper that talked about how bad proof of work blockchain systems are, and NFTs that are built on them, like Ethereum and Bitcoin, how bad they are for the environment. And a lot of us, you know, the artists and then collectors and supporters from the community kind of knew that there was an issue, but we didn't really know it. So he really, even though he got villainized a bit by the community because people just wanted to be able to keep on making, you know, NFTs without having to worry about it, he did us a favor by drawing attention to a real problem. And it got pretty nasty in early 2021, where environmentalists, some of the artists were actually telling me that they were getting death threats from environmentalists because they were saying, oh, you artists that are making NFTs, you're destroying the planet, and, like, you know, this is ridiculous, and, like, all you're doing is commoditizing art and destroying the planet. And I had friends sort of on both sides, right? Like, and I felt bad because in a lot of cases there are these artists that maybe came from countries where they didn't have a car and they had never flown and they had almost no impact on the environment. And here they are getting beat up because they made an NFT and they didn't actually understand what the impact was, right? So there was a lot of misinformation flying around. So that's when I started Green NFTs. It started with a single tweet. I was just sad because I saw all the fighting going on, often between people that I liked, and it wasn't going anywhere positive. So I sent out this tweet that said if I kickstarted a bounty to find more efficient ways to mint NFTs and kicked in, say, $1,000 to start it, would other folks help out? And the crypto art community was amazing, you know, again, because these are the people that we'd all been together for 3 or 4 years. Artists started selling work and donating the money to the cause. We raised $100,000 very quickly, had 50 teams enter, and so half of the entries were sort of around education and helping artists understand the real impacts and what options they have in terms of platforms and the differences between proof of work and proof of stake. And the other half of the entries were about actually, you know, software and open source code to try to help reduce issues, things like open source lazy minting protocols. So really showed that the community was alive and well, and it was a way to take all this anger and human energy and kind of funnel it into something positive. And on the tail of that, Hic Nunc launched, which is on Tezos. So for folks that may not know, Tezos is a proof of stake blockchain. I won't get too deep into the technical aspects, but that means that it's super efficient relative to things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So, you know, it may be a thing you want to do when you do your research around, when you think about where you want to launch, if the environment's important to you. You know, there's lots of areas where you can go, including greenNFTs.com, to learn a little bit more about which platforms use which protocols or which consensus mechanisms. All right, so I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Let's see. So this is just to say that last year and last summer in particular was really confusing, right? Because the press would come out and say, one day they would say that NFTs are dead and the bubbles popped. And then the next day they would say there was a record sale and that NFTs were the future. And then the next day they would say they were dead again. So it kind of gave people whiplash. It was a little bit of a crazy year. It was good to get the idea of NFTs out into the world, but it wasn't always a positive take. So we've got NFTs have become pretty polarizing, where there are a lot of people that are really angry and kind of hate NFTs, and I think a lot of that comes from misunderstanding. So a lot of what I try to do is, to help educate and help people understand what the real problems are, because there are problems in NFTs, but often those real problems get hidden because there's so much shouting and misinformation. Other things we saw in terms of history, it's weird to talk about history when it was just last summer, but in 2021 we saw a rapid embrace of generative art, which was fascinating to me. I've been studying generative art, making generative art for 20 years, and no one ever had any interest in it or wanted to talk to me about it. And I had been collecting NFTs and talking about NFTs for 4 years, and people thought I was nuts because I was spending money on JPEGs I could see for free. And then all of a sudden, overnight, it felt like the entire world got obsessed with generative art and NFTs, like these two nerdy hobbies that I had. Sometimes I compare it, it'd be like if you had a weird hobby like snail racing that like no one cares about snail racing, and then you go to bed and all of a sudden the whole world is like snail racing's amazing or whatever. Like both my nerdy hobbies just blew up overnight. So this kind of became a big trend. The other trend from 2021 is sort of PFPs. So these sort of are semi-derivative projects that spin out of the CryptoPunks. So I think everybody knows what a PFP is, but that really spikes as almost becomes like the definition of what an NFT is, these PFP projects in 2021. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I would say don't worry if a crash happens. It's actually a lot of the best stuff happens during the crashes or the bear years. So Rare Pepe and CryptoPunks were both sort of in down years. Known Origin, Super Rare, Rareable, they kind of launched towards the tail end of the spike and were fostered during the down years. So this is sort of a silly graph that I made and turned into an NFT that basically says the core community will keep growing. You kind of have to ignore the peaks and valleys, and actually when things slow down and people are saying the market's dead, that's when a lot of the innovation and interesting work comes out. So why is this important to me, other than wanting a new, better system for artists? I think there's a larger question about our generation's culture has become very much digital. And I think NFTs let us preserve and collect that history the way that previous generations did. So, people used to collect, or still do collect, like really important documents or autographs or things that are physical parts of history. But our history exists digitally. And if we find that digital history isn't ownable, sometimes people don't maybe take as much care as they should, right? I think I mentioned earlier, a lot of the work that was done with Flash is at risk. And luckily there are some people trying to preserve it, but I do worry about so much of our culture and heritage being digital, and that it could get lost. So I think one of the benefits of NFTs is that when people feel like they actually have ownership over these digital things, they're more likely to develop a sense of stewardship. The other thing I would say for new artists coming into the space, a lot of times they want to know how to make money or why no one's buying their stuff. And I remind them of sort of the old days in the crypto art community. The goal was always to give more than you take and to give first. So it's sort of a funny adaptation of Kennedy's quote. I say, ask not what crypto art can do for you, but what you can do for crypto art. When you come into any culture, really, but into this culture, and you try to bring something positive and add something before you worry about how much you can extract or take away, those are the people that tend to flourish in the community. The other thing that I tell new artists is to be patient and to have humility. So Xcopy artworks sell for millions of dollars now, and when I was buying them, they cost $2, $3, $4 each, and often they would just sit there on marketplaces and no one would buy them. For the better part of 2018, most of Xcopy's work just sat there on marketplaces, right? he could have given up and just said, well, this isn't working. I'm not going to do it anymore. But he stuck with it, and not every artist is going to become a millionaire. But the point is, his work didn't change. Those same works that were just sitting there that no one was paying attention to, even when they saw them and didn't buy, are now super sought after, right? So sometimes you have to wait for a while for the market to evolve around you. I include Sarah as well. I saw Sarah's work sitting on Super Rare for a better part of a year, not being sold. She goes by the Sarah Show. And I really liked the work, I just didn't have the money. And when I started selling some of the other early tokens I had, I bought up a whole bunch of it, and then other people started to take notice. And if she hadn't had the patience to continue to work and put the work up, or just told herself, well, no one's buying, it must not be any good, then she'd never be where she is today, right? So now her work's at Sotheby's and Christie's, and people, big collectors are seeking it.
How exciting it is to see the importance of writing.
Like 3 pages worth of notes, and I'm definitely going to look back and research some things a bit more. One thing that surprised me that I didn't know was the early platforms in like 2017 and 2018, how they didn't charge fees or commissions for the artists that they had. And I'm just thinking about like how normalized that is now. Like we have our platforms like Foundation, Super Rare, etc., who are charging a commission for artists when they do sell their work. And I'm just kind of thinking about how, as you move forward, and how we see social media giants kind of looking into the space now, like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. In the future, as the NFT space becomes kind of, I see it a bit like becoming more corporate. Do you have any fears about like this loss of this original crypto art ethos that the community built so early on?
Yeah, I have tons and tons and tons of fears. 2021 was a weird year for me. I usually don't talk too much about the money side of this stuff, but I obviously did very well in terms of being able to sell some of these early tokens and take care of my family. So there was sort of this upside of just accidentally having been in this space early to support artists, but then being able to sell some tokens. But on the other side, I watched my baby, like those of us that kind of started this culture, grow into a teenager. And I think that's an apt metaphor because, you lose control sort of your kids by the time they become a teenager. And our baby turned into a teenager that seemed sort of reckless, right? Like this community and culture that formed around NFTs didn't really necessarily reflect all the values that we were hoping to sort of imbue or put in. And worse, the people that didn't participate in it only see the negative, right? So as I'm sort of the poster child for NFTs, I do a lot of interviews, with the news, and I built a company around it. So I get a lot of NFT hate, like people that hate NFTs talking to me all day, every day. And I try to explain to them that, like, if you go into a culture looking for the worst aspects, it's not hard to find the worst aspects. So a lot of people decide that they hate NFTs. They go into the culture looking to justify that hatred. They find the worst parts of the NFT ecosystem, and then they come back feeling vindicated, right? And I tell them, look, if you go looking for the best parts, you're going to find that same spirit and subculture that we started 4 years ago, which really was altruistic and about trying to support artists and do things like having platforms that didn't take currency, that didn't take a percentage. And the fact that those early platforms didn't take a percentage is really a tribute to how strong the community and culture was back then, but also the heroic individuals like Travis Uhrig and Joe Looney, who put in tons and tons of work and didn't ask for anything back from it, right? So yeah, it's been really hard, actually, to be honest, to watch this community. A lot of people that participated early on have sort of left the community because they don't like the direction that it's gone. But I tend to believe, I won't go too long on this, but philosophically, I tend to believe, I literally felt like 4 years ago and still feel like we're building a new art world. And when I look at the old art world, I often define it as being like an oak tree. And an oak tree, a big old oak tree, it's really hard to change its direction. And there's so many things wrong about the old art market that I don't think we can shift by trying to change that old oak tree. And this new market we're building, I think of it as being like a sapling, like a tiny little tree. And it goes the wrong direction. You know, last year it went the wrong direction in a lot of ways or whatever. But it's still small enough and young enough and malleable enough that I think if enough of us try to move it in a positive direction, we can still build a better, more equitable art market and art world for artists and collectors, right? So that's my hope. Some days I feel more optimistic, and other days I feel less optimistic. But yeah, I guess hopefully that sort of speaks to your question.
Yeah, completely. Part of me wishes that, I mean, I came into the space in 2020, but I wish I was here much earlier just to kind of see that live out, right? And so I'm hoping that we can really hold on to that ethos as we move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and it goes back to the ask what you can do for the community thing. I think the other thing I see a lot of times is people come in, even people that want to participate as artists in the NFT space, and they feel almost self-righteous in pointing out the problems. And I often kind of want to say, like, grab a shovel, right? Like this space wasn't built for you to come in and just use. The way the space evolved is by people coming in, finding problems and trying to fix them, right? So I try to embody that even with my company, right? Where we're trying to solve a lot of the issues that I think are the biggest threats to the space. So it's the people that are excited by the problems and can come in and try to solve them that I think will help us steer it in the right direction. Any other questions?
I think we are.
have one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to just piggyback on your response to that one. I kind of came into the space early 2021. I found sort of some of like the complaints and which were all very fair, but also felt like they came from within the community, or at least the art community at large in a way. I'm just curious about your thoughts, and you've kind of touched on it already, but beginning of this year, there's been a humongous wave of, like, as you spoke to, going into the community from an outside perspective, looking for the worst and like kind of trumpeting the worst points. I found it to be a very politicized almost environment now between people who are involved in art in general and those who are on the outside calling it a scam, a Ponzi scheme, etc. Have you had any sort of like interesting, like useful or like successful strategies in sort of helping to advance that conversation in an open and come in, join us type of way?
Yeah, there's a few things. First, I never try to pressure. Like, the first thing is sometimes people assume, because they think it's a Ponzi scheme, they assume that I want to recruit them. And they're often shocked just by the fact that I don't really care if they participate, right? And that can seem counterintuitive, but like if someone comes and they're angry, I think the first step is them realizing that I don't need them to participate, right? Like, I don't like soccer. Like, it doesn't, it's just not a thing that I do. There's nothing wrong if someone doesn't like NFTs. So giving them the out that's like, yeah, actually, I don't want or need you to be in this space if it's not interesting to you, and that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm mad at you or anything. Like, people like different things, right? So sometimes just starting there helps. The other thing, I think right-click save is actually is doing an amazing job at elevating the conversation. So what I'm seeing, not to like keep pushing right-click save, but what I'm seeing is that when you allow for different voices, even critical voices, right-click save has a lot of people writing that aren't necessarily big NFT fans, but when people gather their thoughts and write really intelligently and make their arguments intelligently, I see that the conversations on Twitter about those articles, the people that respond adopt that same level of maturity and thoughtfulness. And it kind of carries through downstream, because too often on Twitter it's just sort of like a knife fight where people are just doing name calling. But I think when we can put out more literature or more well-reasoned arguments or more thoughtful arguments and make a space where it's clear that opposing or curious voices will always be accepted, I think we start to diffuse the bomb a little bit. So yeah, I don't know if that fully answers it, but to summarize, I would say first step is like, let people know you're not trying to cram NFTs down your throat. In fact, you're perfectly cool with them not having any interest in it, and you're certainly not trying to recruit them, and you're not trying to sell them anything. And then if they come back curious after they've kind of cooled off a little bit, the other thing I would say, when I was pitching my company, but I also kind of use this on interpersonal conversations, is the word NFT or the acronym NFT is so loaded right now with so much animosity, and it's so polarizing that often what I say is like, okay, let's just put NFT aside for a second. Like, forget that word. Let's just talk about digital ownership, right? I think if you think about how, you had, or an old guy like me, I had tape cassettes, and then I had, CDs, and now my music doesn't really exist, physically anymore. It's something that I sort of own purely digitally. And similarly, I had VHS cassettes and then DVDs, right? And now I use Netflix or something like that. So, there's this trend that goes back 10, 20 years of sort of dematerialization and digital ownership. And that's happening, and people didn't freak out quite as much because it kind of happened more gradually. But that's happening, and people are a little bit more comfortable with it when I think you talk about it in those terms. And and then you just say, and NFTs are really at this moment, this point in time, one of the better tech tools in order to buy and sell digital art, because of course art, just like literature and music and video, is following this same trend. And sometimes people are more willing to have the conversation about digital ownership and what that means, and if you throw the words NFT out, even though you're talking about the same thing. It's just the media sort of politicized it, to your point.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just to bookend on that was like, you wouldn't hear an author call themselves a PDF author. Why would anyone refer to themselves as an? Thank you very
You're
much.
right. No, you're absolutely right. I think I can do one more, and then I have to hop on to another call.
Ismael, I think.
Do you mind if, yes, very quick. I just want to add on, you were talking about, that it's not a problem to like flip the market with like pieces, and it's something that I think I'm not the only one that have been thinking about it, right? I've seen people doing like a lot of pieces, doing like selling almost everything, doing very well. People with like very little amounts of pieces doing very well. People who have like a lot of pieces that are selling some very well, some others not. So I guess like there are like, different strategies for everybody, works different depending on the style or, the collectors. Like you can think as every individual piece as a different world maybe. And also that it was interesting that you were talking about the most classic, like traditional artists being like, the top 5, 10, being some of the artists that develop more work, right? But I think if you think about it digitally, like we have the tools that are more scalable, right? So if we really want to flip the market, for example, with generative art, we could create like thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces. So in very, very little short span of time. So just a thought here.
Yeah, I think you have to do, how much work you put out as an artist is actually part of your art, in my opinion, right? It's part, because art is partially, even if you're making, 2D images, there's a performance aspect, I think, for all artists in terms of how you deliver or present that work, and in what quantity. And what I say, make a lot of work, I'm not saying like put a whole bunch of crap out there, right? Obviously, that's not, that's not advice anyone would give. What I'm saying is, if anyone, and you'll hear these voices, if anyone tells you that you're going to flood your market and you're putting out work at a rate that you think is normal or good for you, and you're making an amount of work that you think is good for you, tell them to go take a hike, because it's none of their business, and there's no evidence that artists can damage, that are putting out what they think to be quality work at a sincere pace. They almost never damage their own market. So just don't listen to the other voices, is what I'm getting to. But yeah, it's interesting that you were talking about how some artists can sell or not sell. If we had done this, this sort of digital art residency 3 or 4 years ago, that wouldn't even be part of it. Which just dawns on me as I'm talking, that like no one was selling. You have to remember, no one was selling almost anything for 2 or 3 years. And we were having a blast, right? So I don't feel too bad that, like, I don't think this system is ever going to evolve where every single artist in the world gets to make like enough money to make a living by selling NFTs. I don't think that's realistic, but I do think every artist in the world can participate in this community. That's very, very realistic. So I think, I don't think the premise or the promise should be that every artist gets to make a bunch of money. I don't think that's never going to happen. But I think if we focus on the community aspects, and it's not just, I'm an artist, I don't make as much work as I used to, but for me, that emotional recognition and being part of a community and getting feedback on my work from people in an audience that seem like they care was every bit as important as selling something, right? So I think maybe we need to de-emphasize. I understand it's great to make money and make a living off of your art, and I'm not saying don't talk about that like they used to say, like, oh, don't mix art and commerce, or artists shouldn't talk about money. I disagree with that. Like, you need to make a living, and it helps to make income to offset the time and energy that you put into your work. But I think we also have a responsibility to make sure that we focus on the community aspects. And like, it's not like if you come into NFTs and you don't sell work right away, there's nothing else there for you. There's these friendships and relationships with creatives all around the world, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, to me, like, the best part of doing NFTs this while it's been like connecting to so many people, and yeah, making like a lot of friends as well. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it's great. All right, well, everyone, I'm on at Artnome on Twitter. I'm on Twitter way too often. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. These days, I don't have as much time as I used to because I'm running a company and have a whole bunch of initiatives that I'm involved with. I try to get back to everybody, and I have a soft spot for this residency, so I try to give some preference to the folks that are in a residency. If for some reason you're not able to get a question to me, and it's something really important, you can reach out to me, Cole. And I do have, I think, some hours available for folks that want to do mentor hours. So I do try to set aside some time for that as well, because the community does matter to me, and I'm excited to see what you guys do in this space. So thanks again, Matilda, and I think
Thank you so much.
Nicole might have moved on.
Yeah, I will provide all of you the Artnome contacts information. So yeah, you will be able to connect with Jason whenever you want, of course, following the hours that he has. So thank you so much again. Thank you everybody for attending this lesson. And yeah, see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Vertical Crypto. Have a nice
See you
weekend,
later.
everybody.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.